So now that we've got our rollers and our lead screw nut aligned, we're going to reassemble our X. So let's put the hardware for the stepper motor just kind of resting in the mounting holes so it lines up nicely and it's a little easier to install for us. So I actually just add the inner ones as they're the hardest to get to once everything's put together, and it helps locate them. So I remove the electrical tape. You could just cut it with some scissors, unlike me. And then supporting the motor and turning the coupler to match the orientation of the lead screw, so that little divot for the set screw there, we're going to push it up against the gantry upright. And then we can just take our 2mm driver, and you can always use an L key for this as well. We're just going to get them snug. We'll fasten those down later with the short end of an L key, but just to hold the motor in place so that it doesn't move back and forth when we are installing our set screw, as the spacing is pretty important on that as well. So you can see here, and I'll just get a better view for you. You can see that there's a little bit of room before the thread starts on that lead screw. And we want that thread to be pushed up all the way against the motor coupler, like so. We don't want a gap there, because if there is a gap, that means on the other end, on that bearing that we set our lead screw to be aligned to, the threads are actually going to be pushing up against that bearing. And that's going to cause a lot of misalignment issues. You're going to be rubbing against that bearing. Usually it will actually just stall out the stepper motor, but if it's possible that it will run when set incorrectly, it won't run very well. So we're going to put some non-permanent thread locker on that set screw, tighten it down, just make sure that there's no spacing there, and that the little divot for the set screw was orientated the right way. So we want that lead screw kind of pushed all the way out. We don't want the stepper pushed out, so we want those. That's why we got those first two bolts nice and snug. So we can just double check there. And we're going to go ahead and fasten down those two more bolts. So we can go ahead and install the rest of them now. So there they are. We'll just thread that on in, and you can see the motor kind of sits up against that gantry. It shouldn't matter as long as you got the lead screw spacing to the motor coupler correct, but it does help to have that motor already flush when you're installing that set screw into the lead screw coupler to prevent any issues with spacing. But it's all good there as long as it's flush. So now we're just going to go ahead and tighten down those small bolts, and I'm just getting them snug with the ball nose and then tightening them down with the flat end or the short end of a metric hex key. That way we don't ruin we don't cam out the hexes in the bolts, as they are quite small. There we go. Just give them a final torque. I'm just using a thumb of pressure, no more here. And that's really all it takes for these smaller M3s. There we go. Now our X axis is reassembled.